sharing the link to the presentation if someone prefers to look at it while I'm talking. And I'm now going to share my screen. Okay, I guess you can see it. Great. Let me introduce myself. You saw me last time. I was speaking about a different topic. Now I will talk about institutional repositories from the perspective of an institutional manager and from the perspective of a person responsible for training on repositories, both for end users and for repository managers at institutions. I'm a member of the repository development team at the University of Belgrade Computer Center. And I can say a bit more because it's not a topic of our today's talk. I can say a little bit more during the Q&A session, but what's important is that a few years ago, we didn't have repository infrastructure in Serbia. It was extremely undeveloped with 3 or 4 operational institutional repositories. And then after 2018, when the National Green Open Access Mandate was introduced by adopting the National Platform for Open Science, it was adopted by our ministry responsible for science. Actually, this boosted the development of institutional repositories. Institutions developed their policies, and they started setting up the repositories. At that moment, our team was actually formalized and established. We started as enthusiasts at the beginning, but then institutions started asking about possibilities to develop a repository, and that's how we started working. And from the outset, we established this specific user support. We have IT support, technical support, but user support is actually about training and about responding quickly to all issues and all questions. So I will try to define the outlines of the context that we use to present repositories, because repositories can be presented in many ways. They can be just shown as a database where people upload their content and enter some metadata, and this is one of possible explanations of this kind of infrastructure. So we frame repositories, institutional repositories in particular, as infrastructure. It's very important for us that people understand that this is not just any database, but that it serves many purposes, it has many functionalities, and that it actually helps them promote their work and make it more visible. That's a crucial point. So repository is an infrastructure, and it's very important infrastructure. Also, for me, training, and especially training about institutional repositories, is advocacy. So each time I do the training, I actually try to persuade people that they should use this infrastructure and that they should know how to evaluate this infrastructure and how to assess the functionalities offered by this infrastructure and by other services or databases or infrastructures. Also, in this concept that we are relying on, repository managers are the key players. We don't have many librarians in Serbia. As I mentioned in the informal chat, because before this presentation, most libraries at institutes, research institutes, and some faculties are solo librarians work. They have only one librarian who does all the work, not only related to the repository, but everything else. Sometimes even tasks not related to with library at all. So it's crucial that we empower repository managers to adopt new skills and to accept this work related to repositories as something that is exciting and it's an opportunity to learn. Some repository managers are not happy to be assigned one more task. So it's very important to help them. It's very important to explain to them what's the meaning of this task, what are the other opportunities, and to provide help and support at any moment, to respond as quickly as possible, because they are the players who communicate with researchers. They are the players who actually transfer knowledge locally, and they are those who maintain the repository and do the quality control. Also, we did training of repositories because before the mandates were introduced, and we are doing it now when mandates are in place. And I can say that sometimes we are not so happy that the mandates exist because mandates sometimes, well, sometimes they discourage people. People don't like when they have to do something. So sometimes mandates discourage people who perhaps would be motivated to do something without mandates, but also they push people to do some things that they otherwise wouldn't do. So our idea, we do everything related to the mandates. We explain the mandates, we support mandate compliance, but we are actually trying to explain to users that there is a whole world, very exciting world beyond mandates, and that the true purpose of repositories is related to this world more than to what has to be deposited. And also it's about building trust between users and between repository managers and end users, and between us who are doing user support and repository managers. I've outlined briefly the context to which this training is related. Basically, there are two concepts. One is when there is no institutional repositories, we do the training for such institutions who are still planning to establish an institutional repositories. But the main body of training is related to institutions that have institutional repositories. When we do training for those institutions that don't have a repository, then we try to outline the benefits of open access. Greater focus is laid on this topic. We try to explain how repositories increase the visibility of research outputs. We try to highlight good practice examples, which are useful if the institution is thinking about establishing a repository. And we sometimes do demos or hands-on training about Zenodo, because Zenodo can be used by anyone. And we have an institution in Serbia that doesn't have resources to establish an institutional repository, but they are using very nicely a Zenodo community, and they are depositing their research outputs in a Zenodo community dedicated to this institution. So this is one of the possibilities, and we, in such situations, we try to make it clear and to explain how to use Zenodo. And always there are Q&A sessions that are quite extensive when we discuss this topic. As for institutions that have institutional repositories, we have trainings for repository managers, for researchers, and sometimes even for decision makers, because we have these trainings for decision makers when they are thinking about establishing a repository, but also once this repository is set up and they want to encourage researchers to start depositing. Then we have some trainings where we explain to them which measures they can take to foster these processes in their institutions. Also, we try to highlight the benefits of open access, but usually this story is more focused on policies and mandates, because they are in place. Such institutions usually have some policies or are relying on the national policy. We try to explain self-archiving policies. This training is more focused on specific issues. Some of them are quite difficult. For example, our researchers find these self-archiving policies and versions, which version they can deposit and which cannot. They find it quite difficult and tricky. So we are trying to explain this, and also we share some tips, tricks, and practical advice. When we focus on researchers, when the training is for researchers, we especially try to highlight the visibility and the way the repository is embedded in existing infrastructure, international infrastructures, and the mechanisms through which repositories increase the visibility of research outputs. And you will see later, one of the key issues is the relationship between repositories and social media. There are many questions about this. And also in Serbia, we had quite a bad experience, and we are still having it, with failed national CRIS systems, some databases that are supposed to serve as CRIS systems, and they are not doing this properly. So researchers usually have to add all bibliographic information manually, and they are quite sick of it. So it's very difficult for us to explain that a repository is not that kind of a database, and to explain the differences. Sometimes the discussion gets very, very tough, and we have to, we sometimes lose half an hour or even more discussing these topics, and sometimes the discussion gets very, very unpleasant. So this is one of the local issues that we have to take into consideration. I'm highlighting this because other environments may have some similar issues. Also, during Q&A sessions, and especially when explaining the difference between repositories and social media, we actually have to deconstruct many misconceptions, and our Q&A sessions are usually focused on this approach of deconstructing misconceptions, of explaining. We usually know what the misconceptions are, and we try to explain them in advance. So to prevent some unpleasant questions or aggressive discourse, etc., because such things happen. This is an overview of the formats we are using. We usually have 2-hour sessions when we train researchers, and we have a lecture and demo or a lecture and hands-on session, depending on technical resources. When we don't have computers for each user, then we do just the demo. And I will explain some very locally specific issues that we have to take into account. Why these 2-hour sessions are too long. And we see this, and we see the need to change this. But the problem is that it's very difficult to persuade researchers to attend trainings or repositories, to attend multiple sessions in a row. So we know that they will come only once, and we want them to hear the whole story. And that's why we cover all the issues related to policies, related to copyright issues, related to technical issues, depositing in the repository, quality control, etc. The visibility issues and functionalities, we try to cover it all in a 2-hour session, because we know that it's very difficult to persuade them to come once again. Even if they wish, there are other duties, and training on repositories or any training provided by librarians is unfortunately not a priority for them. So this is the explanation why a 2-hour session, usually without a break. We will try to change this. We are considering this issue and analyzing the situation. Once the pandemic started, we were actually plunged into online training. We had some training sessions that were agreed and set up before the pandemic. So we didn't want to cancel them, and we started spontaneously at the beginning using Skype, and we switched to Zoom. We started organizing training sessions, even without camera. It was usually shared screens, etc. So we devised a model for these training sessions, online training sessions, that may lead to a solution to these 2-hour sessions, how to shorten them. It's easier to persuade the researchers to attend online sessions, because they can do it from home. They can do it in free time. We can offer this training session in the afternoon hours, sometimes even in the evening. So it's much easier to organize this. And when we are doing this kind of training, we can actually split the full range of topics into specific topics. So we now, sometimes we use a demo set. We have a demo session that is focused only on depositing. And then we have additional sessions about additional tools, about integrations of repositories. So I prefer this model, and it seems to me more efficient. So we will try to translate this model into live trainings when we get back to live trainings. As for repository managers and training for repository managers, it is actually the most important part of our work. This is fully customized. We have informal conversations to establish what they know and what they don't know, and then we adjust to them. Sometimes if those people are more skilled, we can, in 2 or 3 sessions, we can cover the full range of topics. Sometimes it takes 1 to 3 months to train a good repository manager who will be able to deal with users, to deal with data verification, to deal with repository maintenance. So this is fully customized, and this is actually the most challenging and the most exciting part of our work. And we are quite satisfied with the model we've developed. It's quite exhausting, but that's where we also learn how to improve the infrastructure and how to improve the workflows. Also, we provide additional training upon request. So there are many topics that are related to repositories. So these are some of these topics, and it's very interesting, and it's very inspiring to see how repositories can be integrated into some other services that are used, like ORCID profiles or reference managers and other things. So an important element of our training are training materials. I will show, I share some links, and I will show how they look. This is the manual for end users. This is usually a PowerPoint presentation, including about 60 to 70 slides with many screenshots. All procedures are explained in detail, because when we are doing these 2-hour trainings, we cannot cover, we don't expect participants to remember everything. We don't accept them to adopt all the skills needed for efficient work. So we actually put all the information in this manual that can be used independently. Some researchers don't even need those live sessions. They can read. If they're more skilled, they can read the manual and they can deposit very successfully. So this is a key point. We have this prepared in advance. We can have this shared in advance. There is a link on each repository leading to a user manual. So we update these user manuals, and they're always available to researchers. We are now planning to, and we started some work on it. Now we have for each repositories, and that 20 something, we have a separate user manual. They're very similar, but they're personalized. They're adjusted to the institutions. Now we are developing a wiki, and we will have one wiki that will be regularly updated. It will be easier to update this wiki. We also have a very extensive manual for repository managers. It's about nearly 100 pages now with many images. All the procedures are explained in detail. And also we have additional tools. There is a link in one of the previous slides. There was a webinar organized by EIFL about these additional tools that we developed. So we provide also instruction about these tools, and this manual is also regularly updated. It's shared on Google Drive, and we will probably keep it like this for some time. You can, it is Serbian, but I believe that you will be able to understand the structure. It's publicly available. You can even comment, so please visit the link and have a look. So I mentioned before, common misconceptions are a crucial point in our training sessions. So I just listed some of them. And actually we are building our training sessions and our argumentations for training sessions around these misconceptions. We also try to track to get some feedback from researchers and see how these misconceptions are changing. So each time we identify some new misconception, we cover it in our training. So these are the most typical ones. That research outputs in the local language are not interesting to an international audience. Research outputs in the local language are rarely cited by international authors, and social networks increase visibility much better than repositories, that are more efficient, and that's why they should be using social networks and they don't need repositories. That's a very common misconception. And also that once the rights are signed away by signing the contract with publishers, nothing can be deposited in the repository. I will discuss all of these in further. So what you should keep in mind that in dealing with these misconceptions and in training, in organizing training, repository should be seen as a part of a global network. It is embedded. It has technical capabilities of being embedded in a global network of communication exchange. So in this field, aggregators are our best allies. So that's why we register all of our repositories for harvesting. We optimize it for Google Scholars. And then during trainings, we very explicitly and even aggressively demonstrate the effects of these integrations. We show the records from our repositories in Core, in Base, in OpenAir, in Unpayable. We try to demonstrate this, to present tangible examples, because once researchers see that the repositories are not isolated, that their work is not buried in some local database, that it's visible, it's globally visible, they start adopting repositories as infrastructure. Also, we have this open access mandate. We are trying to recruit deposits. We are trying to collect those accepted manuscripts, accepted manuscripts, and deposit them in repository, make them open access. And Core Discovery button and Unpayable button are very useful in discovering this content. So it's very good if you have an example from your local repositories when you can click on, for example, Core Discovery button and get to your repository. Unpayable button and a PDF of an author's manuscript is open. So it's very effective when you have show this. So that's how it works. These are just plugins that are very quickly installed. So we have them on our computers and we show this during trainings. So when I click on either of these buttons, I get to a local repository, to a manuscript that is open access, that is allowed by a publisher's policy to be made open access. This is the essence of being open access. Also, we track visits, downloads, and citations. There's still not the tools available for tracking visits and downloads in repositories are still not optimal, because the repository content is also visible in aggregators, and we don't have the insight. Sometimes we don't have the insight into these metrics, but we enabled metrics in our repository. So this is, for example, a very instructive example that does away with one of the misconceptions. This is a paper in Serbian, in the Cyrillic alphabet, and it has quite many visits from Poland, United States, Germany, so from countries when Serbian is not commonly spoken and read. So this is one of very illustrative examples, and this example works. This kind of demonstration works. Also, the coverage, one of our repositories that has the majority of content is in the local language. It's seen all over the world. And we also use Altmetric and Dimensions APIs. You can also use Scopus API to display citations. We display citations and Altmetric scores in repositories on item views, in item view on landing pages. So as for examples, the best thing is to choose local examples. those striking examples, we call them champions. So these are usually early career researchers who have adopted repositories and they use it very frequently. We also have some senior researchers who have deposited all of their publications in a repository because once they retired, they want to have this all in one place. They want the whole world to know about their brilliant career. And these are just perfect examples. We have such people. And commonly, senior researchers are quite reluctant to deposit, but there are such examples, and we try to promote them. Also, there are some institutions, for example, which use repositories as evidence in their institutional procedures related to research promotion. So we try to highlight these examples, to name these institutions. They look at this institution, they are using repository in this way. Also, we usually mention by name motivated individuals. So, and we even say, okay, you can contact them, they can share their experience. Also, we try to display citations, and we also promote and explain interesting use cases. So we support content diversity. For example, to the left, these are posters. Then we have research data. Researchers started depositing research data, and in Serbia, it's very characteristic, they prefer institutional repositories. There are several institutions where they prefer institutional repositories, automatic ones, although we've explained to them that institutional repositories are not ideal for research data, but they prefer to have them preserved at their institutions. We also have some videos already. So we always show these examples. People may get idea how to use a repository in a creative way. Also, altmetrics works for us very well because there are always some unexpected metrics. For example, a video citing a paper, a research paper, a video how to make a barbecue. So there are videos about food advantages of some kinds of food that cite some of our papers. Some papers are cited in English by Wikipedia, and our researchers are not aware of this. So for example, what is important for researchers is that their papers are cited in some public policies or patents, and they're not aware usually of these mentions. So we try to display this during our training sessions. Also, I like this example very much. The citations revealed by Google Scholar. So this paper is in Serbia, it's in Cyrillic alphabet. It was deposited in the institutional repositories, and Google Scholar shows that it has 73 citations. The author has never been aware that there are so many citations. So in all these citations can be seen. So had not this publication been deposited in a repository, we would have never known about these citations. Also, there is an example from technical sciences where we have a paper published in a print-only local journal that is really poorly ranked. Researchers usually score no points when they published in this journal. Publishing in these journals is not encouraged by research assessment policies. But this paper is a good paper. We deposited it in the repository already the next year in 2013, and that's when it started gathering citations. So it now has 93 citations, and these citations come from highly ranking journals published by major commercial publishers. So this is one of our favorite examples that we usually show during training sessions. Also, repositories, we have the export functionality in our repository, so we can export metadata in the BibTeX format, and this can easily be imported in ORCID. So we have these are our two champions. One is a junior researcher, a PhD student, and the other is a senior researcher. In both examples, they have papers published in some local conference proceedings in the local language. These publications don't have a DOI. They are not visible in international databases, but once deposited in the repository, they could easily make them visible in their ORCID profiles because they imported metadata in ORCID, and anybody can click on this link and see the publication. So this is one of the very effective examples that usually gains attention during our trainings. This is one of the tricky issues. I won't discuss it. We can discuss it further during Q&A. But these are some arguments why actually repositories are better than they increase visibility better than social networking websites. And I'm sharing two images that you can reuse because they work very well during our training sessions. This is a scheme showing the dissemination paths from repository to the outer world through the metadata harvesting protocol, through machine readable metadata, and even through web scraping. This is where your repository is visible if you've done things right, if you set up the technical infrastructure properly. And this is ResearchGate. So it's quite clear why research institutional repositories increase your visibility, researchers' visibility more efficiently. This is another tricky issue, and it sometimes you have to be very tough discussing this. This question usually comes at the end of the training, where we've already explained everything about policies. So when a person asks this question at the end of the training, I promise to Elsevier, I won't make power available to anyone. The question is usually formulated like this. This means that this person doesn't really want to share their work. And then we have to be very explicit when explaining. So we ask the journal is in question. We go to the journal's website. We go to Sherpa Romeo. We analyze the policy, and we explain that actually the information on the journal's website is misinterpreted, and that researchers are able to upload this and this version after this and this embargo period. And also they are afraid that sometimes something that should not be seen will be seen. So we explain very clearly that there is a quality control step, that research repository managers check every single deposit, because we are doing so in our repositories, and that the repository manager will correct all the problematic issue. These are the takeaways for researchers. We don't expect them to learn everything. We don't expect them to adopt all the skills during 1 or 2 training sessions. It's important for them to understand that the repository is an infrastructure, and that is owned and controlled by their institutions, that is by themselves. This is their own infrastructure. And in Serbia, researchers in humanities particularly like this point. They like the idea of having their own infrastructure, promoting their research related to local topics. Also, someone is taking care, repository is curated, so they should know that they can contact a repository manager, and they can resolve issues, they can get the support. Repository is here to stay. So this is not a CRIS system, a failed CRIS system that would die after a year or 2. No, the institution will take care of the repository. And also they usually understand this after the training. They usually understand that the misconception of small languages is actually a misconception, and that with the infrastructure we all have, there are no small languages, there are no national topics, all research can be globally visible. And that is actually what encourages them to start depositing. Also we are gaining some results in the area of content diversity. Always there are 1 or 2 persons who would like to share other types of content, and we try to support and encourage this. So they know this is what we expect them to understand at the end of the training, but they know that they have the user manual, they have the repository manager, and they have us as user support, and they can ask us any questions they like. So that's all from me. We can switch to Q&A.
Thank you so much, Milica. That was wonderful. And I love your visuals explaining the difference between repositories and social networks, because we usually show the table with difference, but I think when you present it visually, it works much better, and your takeaway messages are also excellent. I was about to tweet them when you stop.
I usually I show these slides I show them at many trainings, and they've already been tweeted. So, but we also have some live champions. We have some researchers who actually try to do an experiment and to share the same paper on a social networking site and in a repository. And during one conference, there was a young researcher who said, okay, I've done this, and I monitored what would happen, and the Google Scholar and Google captured, it took less time to capture the paper from the repository than from ResearchGate. So I don't know, I'm not aware of any, I don't have my own examples because I don't use ResearchGate, but we have such examples, and they are shared readily by researchers.
I also asked colleagues how they encourage researchers to attend institutional repository trainings, and Richard wrote that they highlight more on the benefits that researchers will get after the training, and that usually pursues them to attend.
We have this open access mandate, so over the past 2 years or more, some of these trainings were actually made compulsory, not by us, but by institutions. But it's sometimes we repeat these trainings. For example, at the faculty, one of the faculties in Belgrade, we had a series of live trainings. We covered more than 80 people during live sessions, and the uptake was very poor. And once the pandemic started, it was very interesting for them to attend these trainings. So we covered several dozen people who had already attended the live trainings. And that's the moment when they started depositing. Also, what I observed is that the quality of questions asked at the beginning of this process some 2 years ago, the quality of questions improved. Now we have new generations of young researchers coming. They usually adopt repositories more eagerly, and they're usually more creative in inventing how to use it. So we have more questions about research data, about other kinds of research outputs than about, for example, copyright issues. And also, what is a good thing in Serbia is that we have very high open access rate in humanities, because of the venues where our researchers publish. They publish in local publications. We have our monographs in Serbia are subsidized. They're not very luxurious, but they are subsidized by public funds. So they can be made open access, and they are usually deposited in repositories. So in institutions where we have where humanities prevail, we have more than 90%, 95% open access content to repositories, as opposed to 60 or 70% in institutions in STEM.
And there are also lots of thanks in the chat for making your slides available, because it saved time for people. They could listen and they didn't need to take notes while you were speaking.
You can view slides. I always share my slides, because some colleagues who do trainings on repository, they use these slides, and I find it quite helpful.
Then we have a couple of questions, and I suggest that we start with training related ones, and then we'll take institutional repository related ones. So Theodosia is asking, the training you do for repository managers, are you focusing on Serbian repository managers only, or do you also do for people outside Serbia repository managers training?
We do training for repository managers who are in our network, who are using repositories developed by the University of Belgrade Computer Center. I could do training for any repository managers, but if we provide training for repository managers, it's good to know the system you're working with. So you need to know all the technical details. This is very technical training. So we know all the tiny issues related to the system. So this is this kind of training. We also provide training about general issues, about copyright, about anything else that is related to information retrieval, for checking information. But the focus of the training is on technical issues. That's why we provide training for not even for all local research repository managers, but for those in our system.
Then Nina from Ashesi University in Ghana wrote that I think the emphasis for many institutional repositories in Africa is often to make local content available internationally, and of course to make it visible.
Yes, our situation is very similar to the situation in Africa, and we are using this space. So our infrastructure is, I believe, quite similar, and we have a lot in common.
Then for colleagues who are working with this space and who experienced lost content recovery issues, Judith is asking if anyone could help with regaining some lost repository items, retrieving handles. So if anyone knows how to help with this space platform, please drop a message in a chat, and I'll also follow up via email you, Judith.
My advice would be to set up backups. I had a repository, a different kind of a repository before 2017, because actually my institute was the first institute to have a fully functional institutional repository, and we used Opus, German open source software. I was quite satisfied with it. It wasn't as powerful as this space, but I could handle it myself. And we didn't have backup procedures, and we didn't lose any content because we already had an alternative solution. But it was very stressful because we had several hacker attacks, and these are very stressful situations. So now our technical team at the University of Belgrade Computer Center takes great care about backups. We have daily backups, and our repository managers and researchers know that actually there will be no loss. And that's one of the key moments in building trust, in promoting repositories. So there are some technical issues that need to be resolved despite poor resources, and they should be treated as priority.
And related question to that from Nametso: where does one host institutional repository? Do you host it locally? Do you use national infrastructure?
At the University of Belgrade Computer Center, they host all of the repositories from our network. This is provided as a kind of a service, full package service. They have hosting, IT support, regular updates, and user support. And we have a dedicated IT team doing technical support and development, and there are currently 3 of us doing user support. And all the content, all the repositories are hosted at the University of Belgrade Computer Center. With our infrastructure in Serbia, I don't think that it would be sustainable to host repositories locally. because institutions cannot pay for serious and responsible IT support. So it's always improvisations, and that's why we are hosting them centrally. Some universities have their own repositories and they are hosted by the universities, but all the repositories from our network are hosted centrally. Mm-hmm. Separate instances, but hosted centrally.
Thanks. Then there is a question about ORCID. How does one share the repository deposits with ORCID?
If you can, there are two ways. One is if your repository supports metadata export in BibTeX, then you can export the records that you need from your repository and import them. There is an import feature in ORCID, and you can import your metadata using this feature. Other option is if you don't support export, you can always use reference managers such as Zotero, Mendeley, and import one by one all those publications that you need, export them from, for example, Zotero in the BibTeX format and import them in the repository. Also, there is a new feature included in OpenAir. If your repository is harvested in OpenAir, you can, using link and import was the name of this feature in ORCID. You can import records from harvested by OpenAir from your repository directly into your ORCID profile. But please mind, I've tested it yesterday. You can import only those records that have PIDs. If your repository doesn't support PIDs, you cannot import these particular records that don't have a PID. So there are several ways to do this, and I believe this is really good to include this in training.
I put a link to Explore OpenAir portal where you can find publications and link to ORCID. But it's on the researcher level, because I think you have to authorize your ORCID, right? So it's not something that a repository manager could do, but it's something that a researcher could do.
Yes, there is. This is something that a repository manager can technically do. The question is whether the repository manager should do this. There is a feature, trusted individual in ORCID. So you can appoint a trusted individual, a librarian, to update your ORCID record or your college. So technically, a repository manager should do, but I don't think that a repository manager should do this.
Then there are a couple of questions about software. What repository software do you use? What's your take on DSpace?
We are using DSpace, and we also have a set of tools that actually complement DSpace. My impression is that DSpace is complicated. I'm not a technical person. I'm a librarian without any prior training regarding anything related to software development. But for example, when I had this previous repository, it was written in PHP, and I could fix some simple things. As for DSpace, I don't think that it can be handled without serious IT support, without serious IT people involved in development. And there are some issues, for example, the author identities. Also, search is not optimal in DSpace. I'm not satisfied with the search feature in DSpace. So that's why we developed a set of specialized tools. We can share. Yeah, Irina has just shared the recording. You can see the recording. These are not open source. These are developed just for our repositories, but you may get the idea how to improve DSpace. But it works for us.
Then there is a question from Lydia. How can one harvest published papers in other journals to the institutional repository?
Institutional repositories should have, if you're using a standard platform, you should be able to enable harvesting. IT people should know this, how to enable harvesting in institutional repositories. So if a publishing platform has an open the metadata harvesting protocol enabled, and the metadata is exposed, then you can enable the harvesting feature in the repository and harvest. I recommend to harvest this kind of content into a dedicated collection. I don't know which software you're using, but it should be possible with all standard software solutions.
Then you mentioned that copyright is usually, and copyright management is usually a topic of repository managers training, and there is a request from Esther to have a training on that. So thanks Esther, we'll follow up on that.
Yeah, this is one of the most difficult issues. And now I will, early in May, I will be doing training for the University of Kragujevac, as they asked me. They have a different kind of repository, but they asked me to provide this kind of training about copyright management related to repositories.
And then Modupa is asking, kindly explain the importance of needs assessments, policies, and mandates. Do you do anything like that? Do you do needs assessment?
Assessment related to
repository developments or improvements? Do you ask your researchers from time to time whether they're happy with repository?
Yeah, we have a constant feedback from them. We encourage feedback. This is not formalized. We don't send them surveys, but during trainings, it is explained to them that, for example, they can handle any errors, any technical issues by contacting their repository manager. And we also invite them to submit their ideas and their suggestions. This is crucial for infrastructure development. The services that we provided 2 years ago were much poorer than what we are providing now. And most features and most of these customized tools were developed to address user needs. So this is crucial for our platform development. So they are free to submit any kind of suggestions during training, after training. They know the persons they can contact. They can do this either directly. I always share our contacts. They can do through their local repository managers. We collect all these ideas. We are using Jira as our communication system between among team members in the repository development team. And I always note down all these suggestions in our Jira system. So once a month, approximately, sometimes more often, sometimes less often, we have meetings with the team, and then we discuss which of these improvements are sustainable, which of them are urgent, which can wait, whether we can allocate some resources to resolving a particular issue or not. And then we actually adopt some of these ideas. After each of these improvements, we organize training for repository managers so that they can be incapacitated to deliver training locally to their researchers. So it's crucial. This assessment is permanent in our case.
Thanks. Miriam asked a question about altmetrics in institutional repositories and whether it's very technical or not. What's your assessment? And I put a link to instructions.
I wouldn't know how to integrate the API, but there is an API, and our IT people said that it wasn't too difficult. For example, when they realized they could integrate the dimensions, I highly recommend to integrate the dimensions citations in repositories, because dimensions citations are citations in papers. That's what it's important. This is important for researchers. So our IT guy, main IT guy, managed to integrate this API, the Dimensions API, while waiting for an airplane while we were getting back from a conference. It wasn't too difficult if people are skilled with APIs.
And is it a free API?
It is free. It is free. And you can also check for Scopus, because Scopus offers something. I'm not sure what of it is free or not, but we integrated Scopus citations as well. Researchers love this. That this is what matters for them.
Then Theodosia has two questions. Could you demonstrate a few of your customized tools in your institutional repository? And next question is, what percentage of your interaction with researchers is informal, unplanned?
The most of it. The most of it. I'm quite keen on informal communication, and that's where I learn a lot through informal communication. People are during formal trainings there. Sometimes they're shy. Sometimes they don't find it appropriate to comment. But during informal conversation, especially one-on-one, they reveal so many interesting and useful things. And this is the I probably lose too much time, but my main job is people-oriented, user-oriented, and the greatest part of my communication is informal.
There are some more requests to show what other tools you use that complement this space and how exactly do you use them. I don't know, maybe you could share your screen and then show
I can. Yeah, I can.
Some of your repository pages or any other repository pages.
Yes, I will show, but you know that you can see all of them I will share my repository. You can see all of them in our webinar that Irina has shared a link.
Yeah, but it's 1 hour webinar, and maybe if you show now, maybe
yeah,
would be...
they will be encouraged to have a look. This is one of our standard repositories, and this is one where we have the greatest part of content is in humanities. So we have this application is publicly available, APP, Authors Project Publications. The purpose of this application is to mitigate the poor management of author profiles in this space. Because we are using multiple alphabets, we are writing our names in many ways. So this tool enables us to show normalized user names. For example, look at this name, Levushkina. This is in Cyrillic. She has two family names, and also she publishes a lot in Russia. So she has a Russian version of her name, and all of them are connected here. So when they visit this, if they have ORCIDs, we integrate ORCIDs as well. If they don't, we are using local identifiers assigned by DSpace. So they have an overview of their publications. It is possible to export individual records and all the records. It is possible to filter records, and also if citation information is available, it is usually displayed here. Citation information is usually available for records with DOIs. So if a paper doesn't have a DOI, this is not it is not available. Also, we have projects, and this is usually used for managing reports. At the end of the year, we have we need to submit a report. Institutions need to submit a report, so it's very easy, for example, to export all the publications if they are deposited in the repository, to export all of them in one of these formats, to import them in Zotero, and create a list of publications to be readily used in the report. Also, this may be interesting for you. We integrated also the Web of Science citations, but we had to use a workaround, or quite a complicated one. So you can see, for example, dimension citations, and they are listed in a descending order. And when I click here, I go to the repository, and so all of these, and I can see details. This APP application is I need to, yeah, I believe you can see it now a bit better. So the other application is used only by this one is available only to repository managers. And this is the crucial tool where normalization is made, and it also enables, so here we can list all the metadata from the repository and do the massive changes. For example, I find a person, an entity, and then I can assign ORCIDs. I can choose which metadata to list or not, and I can do massive changes here, and I make changes here and save them. This is an external application, but all the changes are reflected in the repository. And also, this is used for import. We support import through Crossref and Dissemin, but we can also use the XML files from Zotero and Mendeley. So sometimes we prepare metadata in a reference management tool, and then import a whole bulk of metadata in the repository, do some editings, and then import them in the repository. We cannot add a PDF file from this application, but we do it in the repository. Also, there is I will show this in another repository. This is an application used to enrich metadata to assign information about projects, about funding. This application does text mining and extracts information about funding. So if I come here, I can review this information. And for example, this is a false positive. I say, okay, I don't want this. But sometimes if it really finds funding information, I can say, yes, choose this one and approve this. And this information will be placed in the appropriate field in the repository. This is also an external application. Also, it enables us to assign Scopus and Web of Science IDs, which are actually linked to citations. Without those IDs, citations cannot be displayed. But we don't add this. This is really tiresome, adding these IDs manually. And also, in most repositories, we also support assigning. These are categories used only in the National Research Evaluation System. So this paper belongs to some category according to the impact factor of the journal, and we can assign these categories. I was very much against including this in repositories, but this is one of the features included upon request from researchers and from request from decision makers. And also we have this application, which I really like. It enables us, this is quite a simple one. I believe you could make it yourself. It enables us to do the quality control of metadata. So the operation is quite simple. There is a query saying, okay, please list all the records that don't have a PDF. And then I can see which records don't have a PDF. I can review them and try to find a PDF. So that's how we are actually managing to decrease, because our ideal is to have all the PDFs here, even if they are not publicly available. We deposit everything, and if we cannot make something publicly available, we just restrict access. But we want to have all our publications here. So we managed to decrease the number of missing PDFs like this. And also if some metadata, important metadata are missing, For example, if DC rights is not, these are usually, where DC rights is missing, these are usually publications without a PDF, but sometimes we omit this field when importing the metadata, so we can do the checks and do the control. These are our, we also have some tools that are not available to repository manager, a monitoring tool for IT people, which is used to monitor whether whether there are some problems in the operation of repositories on the technical level. So you can have a look at the webinar. You can see the webinar, and this is explained in detail there.
Theodosia wrote, a lot of work has gone into this, amazing, almost a one-stop shop for everything.
It's a lot of work, it's very exciting work, and it's a process of constant learning. For example, when I attend a conference, when I see something that is not easily feasible at the moment, I make notes in Jira, because in a year or two, we may be able to implement something.
And how do you track statistics? That was another question, but which tools do you use?
Yeah, we are currently using Google Analytics, but Google Analytics doesn't track visits to PDFs. It tracks only visits to the landing pages. We are using the default metrics feature in this space currently. But this is one of the issues where we can expect further developments globally, because the issue of tracking visits and downloads from repositories is very tricky. For example, all our repositories are harvested by Core. Core actually downloads our PDFs, and Core displays our PDFs, which are in open access. You cannot access those that are not open access. And Core displays those PDFs on their platform. So the number, I usually say, the number of visits and downloads that you see in your local metrics and on Google Analytics is the lowest possible number. It's always higher. The true number is always higher, because we are not tracking the visits and downloads from Core, or visits in Base, or visits in OpenAir. It is possible to see these statistics on those platforms, sometimes, not on all, but we actually need a system to aggregate all of these metrics into a single system and to present it to researchers. So I usually make it clear to researchers that there is something that they cannot see, but they're delighted to see even what is available.
That might be a suggestion for a project for Confederation of Open Access Repositories. Let's mention that.
There were some attempts. There have been some attempts in Latin America, but I haven't seen practical results of this. It would be very, very useful to develop such a tool.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful as always, and thank you very much, colleagues, for writing your questions and also sharing your experiences and feedback. I'll email everyone slides and recording. We continue with our Wednesday webinars, and our next one will be next Wednesday, same time. Using open access route to increase research impact, and we'll have Milica's colleague ORCID and also David Ball, whom some of you might know, especially those ones who are based in Uganda, because he spent some time in Uganda. Thank you so much. And there are lots of thanks. Just checking to make sure that we've answered every question. For certificate of participation, you can email me if you need one. Embargo, Mary is asking how we can do embargo.
It's easy in this space. It's easy in any standard platform. There is a feature enabling this, where you put the date and you set up the DC rights field properly, just at the right value embargoed access, and the embargo is implemented automatically. And once the embargo has expired, the content becomes automatically available. It works quite smoothly.
Mm-hmm. So if you haven't set this up in your repository workflow, maybe you can go back and check how to enable it, because it's also very useful for us. Thank you so much, Milica, and thank you everyone for attending.
My email is at the end of my presentation, and please write. Irina knows I answer all the emails.
Thank you, and have a good rest of the day, and see you at next webinars. Thank you.
See you. Bye-bye.